Hi guys, welcome to tonight's journey into the deliciously strange world of medieval junk food. Even without fast food chains or vending machines, people in the Middle Ages still found creative and sometimes questionable ways to snack. From crispy apple fritters to greasy meat pies and sweet fried dough, medieval street food was anything but boring. If you love quirky history, served with a side of fun, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. Which medieval snack would you dare to try? A spiced meat pie? A honey-drizzled fritter? Let's get into it, and maybe keep a snack nearby. You're going to get hungry. Let's start with one of the biggest hits in medieval snacking: apple fritters. These golden little puffs of deep-fried dough were about as close as you could get to a donut in the Middle Ages. Imagine something hot, sweet, and just a little dangerous. They were made with a simple batter, fried in animal fat like lard, and often flavored with apples or spices if available. These fritters were popular not just because they were tasty, but also because they were easy to make and cheap enough for common folks to enjoy at festivals or market days. Now, while apple fritters might sound delightful, not all medieval snacks were quite so appealing. Take meat pies, for instance. On the surface, a meat pie sounds like a solid meal, and in many ways it was. It was greasy, spicy, and filling. But here's the twist. The crust, called a coffin, wasn't usually eaten. It was more like a medieval Tupperware, a way to hold the food together and protect it from the dirty streets. Inside, the meat might not always be fresh, so heavy spices were used to cover up questionable flavors. Still, if you were hungry and walking through a market, grabbing a hot meat pie from a street vendor might have been worth the risk. Speaking of vendors, it's interesting to know that street food existed even back then. In busy cities like London or Paris, you could find sellers offering everything from hot pies to boiled peas to fried fish. These were the original fast food workers, feeding a population that didn't always have the time or tools to cook at home. For many, especially workers and travelers, grabbing something quick from a street cook was part of daily life. Let's talk about the upper class for a second. If you were rich, your snacks were fancier, often sweetened with honey or flavored with exotic spices. Dried fruits like figs, dates, and raisins were popular. Almonds and other nuts made frequent appearances at banquets and feasts. You might even enjoy little pastries filled with spiced fruit, which were considered both delicious and a status symbol. These snacks weren't just about taste. They were about showing off wealth and access to luxury ingredients like sugar, cinnamon, and ginger. Now, if you weren't wealthy, your snack options looked a little different. Common folk turned to things like bread, cheese, and roasted legumes. Roasted chickpeas or chestnuts were a common portable snack that filled you up and traveled well. You could also find dried peas or beans being sold hot by vendors. These were simple, nutritious, and affordable, ideal for the everyday laborer. Beer and ale were almost always part of the snacking experience. Clean drinking water wasn't guaranteed, so fermented beverages were safer to drink. People of all ages drank weak ale with their meals, and this included alongside snacks. Whether you were dipping your bread into some pottage or munching on a roasted chestnut, chances are you were washing it down with a sip of something brewed locally. Another fascinating part of medieval snacking culture was how religious customs shaped what people ate. On certain days, known as fasting days, people were not allowed to eat meat or dairy. This led to the creation of clever alternatives like almond milk, which replaced cow's milk in recipes, or vegetable-based pottages that were still hearty and satisfying. People found ways to snack even within the rules of their faith. While the idea of a snack, as we know it today, didn't really exist, medieval people absolutely ate between meals, especially when food was available and appetites were strong. Festivals, markets, and holy days were often full of food stands offering warm treats. And at home, a small slice of bread with cheese or a few dried fruits might tide someone over between the larger meals of the day. Let's not forget sweet treats. Honey played a big role in medieval desserts as sugar was rare and expensive. Honey cakes, nut clusters, and even simple fried dough rolled in honey or sprinkled with herbs were popular. These snacks were not everyday fare, but they were highlights of special occasions, celebrations, or religious feasts. Sometimes, regional specialties added variety to the medieval snack scene. In coastal areas, dried or salted fish could be eaten on the go, especially during fasting periods. In Germany, people enjoyed pretzel-like breads that were boiled and baked, while in Italy, small cheese-filled pastries might be offered in busy town centers. Each region added its own flair to the art of snacking, driven by local resources, climate, and cultural habits. Interestingly, some snacks had a dual purpose. Certain foods were not just for eating, but also believed to carry medicinal or spiritual value. Herbal wafers or spiced drinks were thought to aid digestion or even ward off illness. This blend of sustenance, superstition, and practicality shows how food was much more than just fuel in the medieval world. All in all, snacking in the medieval world was diverse, creative, and deeply rooted in the time's social and economic conditions. Whether you were a noble nibbling on a sugared almond or a peasant eating a hot turnip pasty from a roadside stand, snacks were a part of life. And just like today, the act of snacking was more than about food. It was about community celebration and comfort. A warm fritter shared at a festival, a crust of bread passed among workers, or a honeyed pastry served at a feast all carried meaning beyond their ingredients. These small bites connected people to tradition, to one another, and to the rhythms of the world around them. In that way, medieval snacks weren't so different from ours. They tell stories not just of hunger, but of creativity, culture, and connection. Building on the fascinating world of medieval snacking, let's dive into the second major point: the role of social class and accessibility in shaping the kinds of snacks people consumed during the Middle Ages. While we touched on this in point 1, it deserves a fuller exploration, because class was arguably the biggest factor in determining not just what people ate, but how, when, and why they ate it. In the rigid social structure of medieval Europe, your place in society dictated nearly every aspect of your life, and food was no exception. The wealthy elite nobles, clergy, and royalty had access to ingredients, cooking tools, and imported luxuries that were completely out of reach for peasants and laborers. This gap was especially visible in what was eaten between meals. Let's begin at the top of the social ladder. For the nobility, food was not merely sustenance, it was an expression of wealth, power, and refinement. Their snacks were no different. A noble might enjoy imported candied fruits, sugar-dusted almonds, or pastries filled with preserved plums and flavored with rare spices like saffron or clove. The presence of sugar alone, which was expensive and considered medicinal, meant that any snack containing it was automatically elevated in status. Sweetmeats, delicate confections made from sugar almond paste and rosewater, were highly prized and often served in elaborate shapes or with artistic flourishes. Beyond sweets, nobles also enjoyed meat-based snacks. Small game pies, cold cuts, or spiced sausage slices were common at feasts and in between meals. These would often be served with a type of trench bread or wrapped in soft pastry. The food was designed to be eaten without getting one's hands dirty, using a knife, and sometimes a spoon, emphasizing manners and decorum. This contrasted starkly with the eating habits of the lower classes, who often ate with their hands or communal tools. The kitchen of a wealthy household was usually staffed with skilled cooks and bakers, allowing for experimentation and artistry in even the smallest dishes. Cookbooks written during the medieval period, like The Form of Cury compiled for King Richard II, describe recipes that resemble modern appetizers, fritters of fish, minced meatballs in sauce, and spiced wines infused with herbs. These were not everyday occurrences, but they were common enough to reflect the extravagance available to the upper class. In contrast, the poor experienced an entirely different relationship with food. For them, snacking was often born out of necessity rather than pleasure. A farmer or blacksmith might grab a crust of rye bread, a hunk of cheese, or a boiled turnip to eat on the go. These were not foods eaten for indulgence, but to sustain energy for long hours of manual labor. When possible snacks were made from leftovers, a piece of barley cake from breakfast, a bit of dried bean stew from the night before. Unlike the plated luxuries of the upper class, these snacks were eaten directly by hand, often outside, while working or walking. Even among the poor, however, there were small indulgences. A traveling market might offer roasted nuts or warm peas served in simple cups. Children could sometimes get their hands on honey cakes or fried dough if a celebration or holy day was taking place. These moments, though rare, brought joy and a sense of festivity to an otherwise difficult life. Religious institutions further complicated class distinctions in food. Monasteries, while often ascetic, were also centers of culinary knowledge. Monks developed and preserved many recipes and growing techniques. Some monastic snacks, like simple fruit compotes or baked breads, spread to the larger community. Still, what monks ate during fasting periods, such as almond milk, vegetable broth, or bread dipped in wine, could resemble the everyday diet of peasants, blurring the lines between sacred simplicity and enforced poverty. Marketplaces were one of the rare places where classes could visually overlap. A noblewoman might pass through a market stall and buy exotic spices or rare fruits, while a servant could purchase a cabbage or onion. Both might enjoy food from a vendor, though the content of their purchases would be vastly different. Market vendors learned to cater their goods accordingly, offering spiced pastries and sweetmeats to the elite, while supplying thick porridge and boiled beans to the rest. One of the more subtle ways that class shaped snacking was through the pace and setting of consumption. Nobles snacked in private gardens, banquet halls, or shaded patios, often with servants and elaborate presentation. Meanwhile, peasants snacked while walking to the fields at the edge of a barn or sitting on a stone wall. This physical distinction affected not just what they ate, but how they experienced eating as a social and sensory act. Class also determined access to fuel and kitchen tools, which in turn shaped snack choices. The wealthy could afford large ovens, skilled cooks, and a variety of pots and pans, allowing them to bake, boil, and fry with ease. The poor relied on open hearths, basic griddles, or even hot stones. A noblewoman might receive a snack made with puff pastry and preserved fruits, while a village woman might roast onions or mash legumes over a fire. Education and literacy also played roles in the evolution of snack culture. Those who could read cookbooks or travel records learned of new recipes and could experiment with flavor. In noble households, this meant culinary innovation. For peasants, it often meant reliance on oral tradition and whatever local ingredients were available. Recipes were passed down, not written down. Even the use of utensils was a class marker. Nobles used knives, spoons, and occasionally forks, which were rare in medieval Europe. The presentation of snacks often included pewter plates, carved platters, or sweetmeats wrapped in fine cloth. For peasants, food was often eaten from wooden bowls or directly from hands. The material culture of snacking mirrored the economic realities of daily life. In sum, while everyone in the medieval world snacked in some form, the experience was profoundly shaped by one's social standing. The upper class viewed snacks as pleasure, ritual, and display. The lower class viewed them as necessity, sustenance, and survival. This stark divide not only influenced what people ate, but how they felt about food itself. Understanding these class-based distinctions helps us better appreciate the complex layers of medieval food culture. Snacks were never just food. They were reflections of status identity and everyday life. In our next section, we'll explore how these snack habits evolved over time and what lasting influences they had on modern snacking culture. Following our deep dive into class and accessibility, Point 3 explores the evolution of medieval snacking habits over time and their surprising influence on the modern snacking culture we know today. What began as a mix of necessity ritual and indulgence has centuries later shaped how we experience convenience, variety, and flavor in our daily lives. Tracing the evolution of snacking helps us understand not just how food has changed, but how people's relationships with food have developed alongside society itself. The first major shift in snacking culture began in the late medieval period, when trade routes expanded and food preservation techniques advanced. With the growth of cities and commerce, new ingredients began to circulate more freely. Items like sugar, cinnamon cloves, and even dried fruits became more widely available, not just for the elite, but increasingly for the merchant class and some urban workers. As accessibility grew, so did experimentation. New snacks appeared that combined local traditions with exotic ingredients such as fritters, flavored with imported spices, or pastries glazed with sugar. Another shift was the gradual commercialization of food. Previously, most snacking took place at home or during festivals, but by the 14th and 15th centuries, dedicated food vendors and bake shops had begun to emerge in urban areas. These small businesses offered ready-to-eat foods, often tailored to local tastes and budget. The concept of convenience food, something quick, portable, and satisfying, began to take root. It wasn't exactly a bag of chips or a chocolate bar, but a hot meat pasty or a piece of honey cake sold on a street corner was functionally quite similar. Religious and cultural calendars also played a role in shaping the rhythm of snacking. Feasts and fasting periods alternated throughout the year, creating waves of indulgence followed by restraint. This pattern trained people to associate certain foods with celebration or reverence, an idea that carries over to modern holidays and seasonal treats. For example, just as we associate candy canes with Christmas or chocolate eggs with Easter, medieval people looked forward to specific festival foods like fritters at Carnival or gingerbread at St. Nicholas Day. Over time, the act of snacking also became more social. In early medieval times, eating between meals was sometimes frowned upon, associated with gluttony or laziness. But as food became more abundant and street life more vibrant, snacking became a public, even communal activity. Market days, fairs, and religious festivals were increasingly centered around shared eating experiences. One could say that the medieval fairground was an ancestor of today's food courts or food trucks, a place where people gathered not just to shop or pray, but to enjoy flavors together. What also evolved was the aesthetic and sensory appeal of snacks. By the late Middle Ages, food presentation became more elaborate, especially for those who could afford it. Bright colors were prized, and even snacks were sometimes dyed using natural ingredients like saffron or beetroot. The goal was to delight both the eye and the palate, a mindset that lives on today in the way snacks are marketed, brightly packaged, multi-sensory, and Instagram-worthy. Portion size is another area where medieval habits echo into the modern world. Although medieval meals were typically large and shared snacks were small, individualized and meant to satisfy without spoiling the appetite. This balance between indulgence and restraint is something modern snack companies aim for, advertising products that are just enough to get you through your day or your commute. Perhaps one of the most profound connections between then and now is the emotional relationship people have with snacks. In the Middle Ages, a honeyed nut cluster might have marked the end of a harvest, a sign of reward and relief. Today, that same feeling might come from a chocolate bar after a long meeting, or a bag of popcorn on movie night. The emotional nourishment of snacking, the comfort, the nostalgia, the pause it provides remains deeply embedded in our human experience. The evolution of snack packaging also has roots in medieval practices. Though there were no plastic wrappers or aluminum foils, medieval people were creative in how they transported food. Pastries might be wrapped in leaves or linen. Nuts and sweets might be tucked into small wooden boxes or cloth pouches. These early forms of food portability anticipated the importance of packaging in snack culture today. Interestingly, the transition from medieval to early modern snacking was accelerated by two major factors: the printing press and the rise of domestic cookbooks. As literacy grew, so did the circulation of culinary knowledge. Recipes were standardized, copied, and shared across regions. This democratization of knowledge allowed more households to try new snack recipes and refine old ones, creating a foundation for national and eventually global snack identities. This global exploration further revolutionized snack options. The Columbian Exchange brought new ingredients to Europe: cacao, vanilla, potatoes, maize, that eventually transformed European diets. By the 17th century, chocolate drinks and sugar candies were becoming popular in elite circles. These innovations continued to trickle down into the snacking habits of everyday people, albeit slowly paving the way for the birth of modern sweets. Even the idea of branded snacks has a faint medieval echo. Bakers, brewers, and pastry vendors would often develop reputations for particular items, becoming known in their towns for the best fritter, the richest honey cake, or the flakiest meat pie. These reputations were sometimes passed down through generations, much like today's family-run bakeries or regional snack brands with loyal followings. Finally, it's worth noting that the philosophy of snacking as a bridge between meals, moments, or moods is as old as the concept itself. Whether it was a pilgrim pausing on a dusty road to nibble dried fruit, or a merchant grabbing a quick sausage roll before reopening his shop, snacking filled gaps in hunger, in time, in emotion. This bridging function is what gives snacking its timeless quality and ongoing cultural relevance. In conclusion, the evolution of medieval snack culture into modern snacking habits reveals a remarkable continuity across time. What began as a necessity or celebration has grown into an industry and a lifestyle. From fritters to fast food, from market day sweets to supermarket shelves, the essence of snacking has remained constant. It offers joy, ease, comfort, and connection. In our next section, we'll take a closer look at specific recipes from the medieval era and explore how you can recreate authentic medieval snacks at home with modern ingredients and techniques. Continuing from our exploration of the evolution of snacking habits. Point 4 will focus on actual medieval snack recipes, what they included, how they were prepared, and how we can recreate them today using modern ingredients and tools. This not only brings the past to life, but also gives us a hands-on understanding of the sensory world of the Middle Ages. Let's begin with one of the most beloved snacks of the medieval period: apple fritters. Known by various names across Europe, these sweet-fried treats were made by slicing apples, dipping them in a batter of flour, eggs, and ale, or wine, and then frying them in lard or tallow. The result was a warm, crispy snack with a slightly tart and rich interior. Often the fritters were dusted with sugar or drizzled with honey before serving. To recreate them today, you could substitute vegetable oil for lard and use sparkling water or cider in place of ale for a lighter batter. Cinnamon or nutmeg would be welcome additions for extra flavor. Another classic was cheese fritters, or rissoles, which combined grated cheese, breadcrumbs, and sometimes minced herbs or onion into a thick dough. The dough was shaped into small rounds or ovals and fried. These snacks were savory filling and portable, ideal for travelers or workers. A modern version could include a mix of cheddar and parmesan combined with fresh parsley, then lightly breaded and pan-fried in olive oil. For those with a sweet tooth, medieval cooks often made honey cakes. These were dense, slightly spiced cakes made with a mixture of flour, eggs, honey, and sometimes nuts or dried fruit. Without baking powder or yeast, these cakes didn't rise much, but had a chewy, rich texture. You can easily recreate a similar treat using whole wheat flour eggs and a generous helping of honey, along with chopped walnuts and raisins. A pinch of cloves or ginger adds authenticity. Meat pies, both large and small, were a staple of both meals and snack culture. Small handheld pies, often referred to as pasties, might include minced pork or beef onions leeks, and spices baked in a basic flour and water crust. The crusts were often quite tough and sometimes discarded, but modern versions can be made more palatable using a short crust pastry. To keep with the medieval spirit season, you're filling with pepper sage and a touch of cinnamon. In coastal regions, dried or smoked fish became a handy snack, especially during fasting days. A traditional preparation might involve smoked herring served with coarse bread and pickled vegetables. Today, smoked mackerel or salmon could serve as a flavorful substitute, paired with rye crackers and a bit of pickled onion. Another popular dish, particularly among religious communities, was pottage, a thick stew that could double as a snack or light meal. A quick version could include boiled lentils, carrots, onions, and a handful of herbs like sage or thyme. The mixture could be spread on slices of toasted bread for a simple and hearty snack. Wafers. Thin, crisp cakes baked in special iron molds were considered a delicacy and were often flavored with rosewater or anise. Modern waffle irons can be used to replicate these using a simple batter of flour, eggs, milk, and sugar. For flavor, consider adding a touch of almond extract or crushed anise seeds. Almond milk was another frequent feature of medieval cooking and fasting day meals. It wasn't typically consumed on its own, but was used to make porridges, custards, or pottages. Homemade almond milk can be easily prepared by soaking raw almonds overnight, blending them with water, and straining the mixture through cheesecloth. The result is a creamy, slightly sweet base for soups or warm cereal-style dishes. A particularly elegant medieval snack was marchpane, an early form of marzipan. This sweet almond paste was shaped into small figures, fruits or flowers, and sometimes painted with natural dyes. While more of a confection than a casual snack, it was very popular during festivals and among the upper class. To make a version at home, combine almond flour, powdered sugar, and a splash of rosewater or orange blossom water, kneading it until smooth. Medieval snacks also included beverages such as posset, a warm drink made from milk curdled with wine or ale and spiced with cinnamon or cloves. While the idea might seem odd to modern palates, a contemporary version might resemble a spiced milk latte or hot buttered rum. Warm milk with a dash of nutmeg and a spoonful of honey can evoke a similar comforting effect. Of course, many medieval snacks were eaten seasonally. For example, gingerbread was traditionally served during Yuletide festivities. It was often made with breadcrumbs, honey, and spices pressed into molds or cut into shapes, while modern gingerbread uses molasses and baking soda. You can try a historical recipe using only honey, stale breadcrumbs, powdered ginger and cinnamon pressed into a pan and chilled before cutting. It's important to remember that while ingredients were simpler, the flavor combinations were often bold and inventive. Medieval cooks relied heavily on texture and contrast, mixing sweet with savory, soft with crunchy. This playfulness still exists today in snacks like chocolate-covered pretzels or spicy sweet nuts. Many of these recipes reflect a worldview where food was never just fuel. Snacks had symbolic meaning, celebrated seasonal abundance, or provided a brief comfort amid hard labor. Making these snacks today offers a tangible connection to that world, a way to taste the past. So whether you want to recreate a nobleman's marchpane, a worker's lentil pottage, or a market vendor's apple fritter, there's a medieval snack for every mood and skill level. In our next section, we'll explore how these regional recipes varied across different parts of Europe and how geography shaped the snack landscape of the Middle Ages. Expanding on the idea of recipes and preparation. Point 5, we'll explore how geography and regional culture influenced snack preferences across medieval Europe. From the cold coasts of Scandinavia to the warm hills of southern Italy, location played a vital role in shaping what people snacked on, how it was made, and what it meant in everyday life. Geographical diversity in medieval Europe created a mosaic of culinary habits. Different terrains, climates, and agricultural resources naturally led to unique snack offerings. Let's begin in Northern Europe, where cooler climates and long winters meant that preservation was essential. In places like Scandinavia and parts of the British Isles, dried fish, smoked meats, and hard cheeses were staples. These were often eaten with dense rye bread or barley cakes. For example, in coastal Norway, dried cod or stockfish was a popular portable snack that could be rehydrated or eaten as is. In the British Isles, oatcakes and ale were common. These oat-based flatbreads were quick to make on a griddle and could be stored for days. People often ate them with butter cheese or small amounts of honey when available. During harvest festivals, more indulgent items like spiced buns or sweetened berry tarts might be offered, particularly in areas like Cornwall and Kent, where fruit growing thrived. Moving into France, a country known for its culinary richness, even in the medieval period, we find a wide range of snack options reflecting regional variation. In northern France, where dairy farming was dominant, snacks often featured butter, cheese, and cream. A common treat might include small pastries filled with soft cheese or sweet custard. In the south, where olive oil and herbs were plentiful, people enjoyed small fried doughs flavored with rosemary or thyme and sprinkled with coarse salt or honey. French markets, especially in larger towns like Rouen or Paris, offered a range of ready-to-eat snacks. Vendors sold spiced wine pies filled with apples or pears and roasted nuts. In Provence, one could find early versions of what might resemble a savory tart made with goat cheese, olives, and onions on a simple flatbread. In the Iberian Peninsula, the presence of both Christian and Muslim cultures created a unique fusion of flavors. In Al-Andalus, Moorish-influenced Spain, snacks often included dates, almonds, and confections made with rosewater and cinnamon. These ingredients were commonly blended into pastries or small cakes. Street vendors in cities like Cordoba or Granada might sell fried dough sticks with honey, similar to modern-day churros. In Portugal, where fishing was central to daily life, salted sardines or small fish pies were common among working populations. These snacks were easy to transport and eat during long hours at sea or in the fields. Moving eastward into the Germanic states and Central Europe, hearty grains and root vegetables played a larger role. Pretzel-like breads, boiled and baked, were a signature snack in many towns, particularly in areas that would become Bavaria. These snacks were often dipped in mustard or paired with a mug of ale. In colder months, roasted chestnuts and mulled wines were popular and readily available in public squares during feast days. In the Slavic regions, such as Poland and Bohemia, snacks often centered around dumplings, pickled vegetables, and spiced sausages. A small meat dumpling could be boiled or fried and served as a quick bite between meals. Pickled beets or cucumbers offered both flavor and nutrition during the long winters. Fermented dairy, such as soft curds or yogurt, might also be eaten with bread as a light snack. In Italy, a land blessed with fertile soil and access to trade routes, snack culture was vibrant and varied. In the north, cheese and butter were more commonly used, while the south relied heavily on olive oil, legumes, and herbs. Sicilian street food included chickpea fritters, fried rice balls, and pastries filled with ricotta, or honeyed nuts dishes that still survive in local cuisine today. These snacks were not only affordable, but deeply tied to regional identity and seasonal celebrations. Florence and Venice, both bustling with merchants and artists, had their own snack traditions. In Florence, small meat-filled pastries, known as tortelli, might be served during public festivals. In Venice, where trade with the East was strong, spices like cinnamon and cloves appeared even in simple snacks. Sweet and savory combinations were popular, such as pine nut tarts with a dash of pepper. In Eastern Mediterranean regions like Greece and the Balkans, Byzantine and Ottoman influences shaped snack culture. Flatbreads topped with cheese herbs or cured meats were common. Sweet snacks included dried fruits rolled in sesame or honey cakes scented with citrus peel. These snacks were often shared communally, aligning with the hospitality traditions of the region. The Middle East also influenced European snacks, particularly through the Crusades and trade routes. Ingredients like sugar almonds, rice, and exotic spices flowed into European kitchens. As a result, even in more rural regions, it became increasingly common to encounter snacks like almond pastries or candied citrus peels, especially during holidays or special events. Beyond ingredients, geography also determined the tools and techniques available. In forested regions, open fires and griddles dominated cooking methods, whereas urban centers with bakeries had access to ovens for more elaborate baked goods. Water access influenced whether doughs were boiled, fried, or baked. In mountainous areas, preservation was key, so snacks were often dried or smoked to last. Despite all this regional variation, certain themes were universal. Snacks needed to be convenient, satisfying, and, when possible, comforting. Whether eaten in a vineyard in Tuscany or a snowy village in Norway, medieval snacks served as both sustenance and social connection. They were shared among friends, offered to guests, and enjoyed in stolen moments of peace. Understanding regional differences adds depth to our view of medieval snack culture. It reminds us that Europe was never monolithic. Each region contributed its own ingredients, preferences, and culinary wisdom. These local flavors and traditions laid the groundwork for national cuisines, many of which still carry echoes of their medieval roots. In the next section, we'll examine how the religious calendar and seasonal cycles shaped when people snacked what they ate, and how food aligned with both spiritual and practical needs. Now that we've explored Geography Point 6, we'll examine how the religious calendar and seasonal cycles deeply influenced when, what, and why medieval people snacked. In a time when life was structured around the rhythms of nature, and the mandates of faith, eating habits, including snacks, were carefully timed and often symbolic. The medieval calendar was dominated by the liturgical year. This religious framework didn't just determine holidays. It governed daily behavior, including food choices. The year was divided into periods of feast and fast. Feasting days like Easter, Christmas, and Saints' feast days were times of abundance and celebration when special snacks were prepared and shared. Fasting days, particularly during Lent, Advent, and every Friday, imposed dietary restrictions that banned meat, dairy, and sometimes even eggs. During fasting periods, snacking didn't stop, it simply adapted. People turned to plant-based and fish-based snacks. Fried peas, almond milk-based pastries, pottages made from lentils or root vegetables, and honey cakes became popular options. These snacks had to comply with church regulations while still offering nourishment and a bit of pleasure. Almond milk, for instance, was used not only as a substitute for dairy in meals, but also in snack preparations like custards or porridges. Religious communities, especially monasteries, developed recipes that worked within these guidelines. Monastic snacks were designed to be simple, humble, and sustaining. A monk might snack on a slice of brown bread dipped in watered wine, a piece of dried fig, or a handful of nuts. While modest, these items reflected both spiritual discipline and the ingenuity of medieval cooks. Outside monasteries, towns, and villages adapted as well. Bakers would prepare Lenten wafers and other meatless treats, often sweetened with honey and flavored with spices. In wealthier households, chefs became creative with fasting restrictions, crafting elaborate dishes that imitated meat or dairy using allowed ingredients. This gave rise to sophisticated snacks like mockfish made from molded almond paste. The opposite end of the spectrum, the feast days, offered a completely different experience. These were moments of release and celebration, often accompanied by processions, performances, and an abundance of food. Snacks on feast days were meant to delight and impress. Fritters, sugar-dusted pastries, gingerbread figures, roasted nuts, and fruit-filled tarts were common fare. Markets would be filled with vendors selling seasonal items, and homes would prepare trays of baked goods to share with family and neighbors. Feast day snacks were also tied to local traditions. On St. Martin's Day, for instance, goose was a centerpiece, but small pastries shaped like geese were also common as treats for children. During Carnival, just before Lent began, people would indulge in fried foods like fritters and donuts, anticipating the lean days ahead. Each region had its customs, but all shared the idea that certain snacks belonged to certain times. Seasonal cycles further shaped snack habits. In spring, wild herbs and early greens were used in savory hand pies or fresh cheese pastries. Summer brought an abundance of fruit, leading to the creation of tarts, preserves, and fruit-filled cakes. Autumn, with its grain harvest and nut gathering, inspired hearty snacks like roasted chestnuts, apple cakes, and spiced buns. Winter, the leanest time, relied on preserved items, dried fruits, honey nuts, and smoked meats. The agricultural calendar dictated availability, so medieval people naturally adapted their snacking to what was fresh or stored. This rhythm of the seasons made snacks feel special because they were often short-lived. A fig tart might be available only for a few weeks. A batch of honeyed almonds might be saved for a winter celebration. This scarcity created anticipation and deepened the emotional connection to certain foods. Snacks also played a symbolic role in the observance of time. Offering sweets during a saint's day, sharing a cake after a baptism, or breaking a fast with a spiced bun created layers of meaning. Snacks weren't just about satisfying hunger. They marked spiritual transitions, social bonds, and the cycles of life. Even small gestures like handing a friend a dried fig on a pilgrimage carried symbolic weight. Pilgrimages themselves brought a unique dimension to snacking. Pilgrims traveled long distances, often on foot, and required portable, sustaining foods. Hard bread, dried fruits, salted fish, and nut cakes were packed for these journeys. Vendors near pilgrimage sites would sell ready-to-eat items like hand pies, honey cakes, or warm ale. These snacks were functional, but also comforting, a moment of reprieve on a demanding spiritual quest. Additionally, the church often distributed food to the poor on feast days, and these handouts included snack-sized portions of bread, cheese, or pastries. This act of charity reinforced the idea that food, even in small portions, was a form of communal support and spiritual duty. The structure of time itself, from the ticking of the church bell to the turning of the seasons, shaped the cadence of medieval snacking. It taught people patience, restraint, and celebration. It fostered mindfulness, where even a small fig or a crust of bread could carry deep significance. In modern times, our snack habits are often driven by convenience or craving, detached from larger rhythms. But looking back, we see that snacks once anchored people to the year, the earth, and the sacred. They reminded people of what was coming, what had passed, and what to be grateful for. In the next section, we'll look more closely at how snacks functioned as social glue, how they were shared, gifted, and exchanged, and what they meant in terms of relationships, hospitality, and community life. In this next section, point 7, we explore how snacks in medieval times weren't merely food, but powerful tools of social connection. Across all regions, classes, and contexts, snacks were offered, gifted, shared, and exchanged as a way to express hospitality, build relationships, and cement social bonds. In a world where personal interaction was the foundation of both economy and culture, food, especially snack food, became a natural bridge between people. Hospitality was a cornerstone of medieval society. Whether you were a peasant welcoming a neighbor or a noble hosting a visiting dignitary, it was expected that guests be offered food, no matter how humble. Snacks were often the first things served: a handful of nuts, a piece of fruit, or a small pastry. These gestures communicated warmth and generosity. In wealthier homes, a servant might present trays of sweetmeats, marzipan figures, or spiced wine. In simpler households, a guest might be greeted with rye bread, a slice of cheese, or honeyed oats. One of the most visible expressions of hospitality occurred during festivals and fairs. Towns would come alive with food stalls and communal tables. Families would prepare extra portions to share with visitors, and travelers passing through were often invited to partake. These occasions blurred class lines and encouraged the sharing of snacks among strangers. A merchant might offer a roasted chestnut to a beggar. A farmer might pass a hand pie to a pilgrim. These exchanges fostered a sense of unity and goodwill. Snacks also served as diplomatic tools. In royal courts and among the nobility, offering food was a strategic act. A noblewoman might send a box of preserved fruits or sugared almonds to a political ally, or a lord might gift a delicately wrapped parcel of pastries to curry favor. These edible gifts were status symbols and tokens of alliance. In monasteries and religious communities, gifts of food, especially rare or elaborate snacks, were exchanged between abbeys or offered to patrons as signs of respect and gratitude. Gift-giving wasn't limited to elites. Among the common folk, food was a deeply personal and heartfelt gift. A grandmother might bake honey cakes for her grandchildren during holidays. A neighbor might leave a bundle of fresh apples or roasted nuts on someone's doorstep after a good harvest. These acts were rooted in tradition and mutual care. They weren't grand gestures, but small, meaningful ones that reinforced communal ties. Sharing snacks also played an important role in courtship and romance. In markets or town gatherings, a young man might offer a sweet treat to someone he fancied. In some regions, small confections were exchanged as tokens during betrothals or weddings. These treats symbolized sweetness, promise, and prosperity. Even in literature and ballads of the time, sharing food often accompanied declarations of love or moments of intimacy. Communal snacking was also central to labor and cooperation. During harvests, building projects, or shared workdays, it was common for workers to pause and eat together. These moments weren't just for rest, they reinforced teamwork and solidarity. A woman might bring fried dough for the threshers. A group of carpenters might pass around a jug of ale and pieces of bread. In these contexts, snacks were practical, but also ceremonial, a small break to acknowledge collective effort. Religious gatherings, too, featured communal snacks. After sermons, celebrations, or funerals, it was customary to share food, even if simple. These moments helped mourners, worshipers, or community members feel grounded and connected. Breaking bread, both literally and metaphorically, was a gesture of shared faith and humanity. Snacking also crossed cultural and linguistic boundaries. In port cities or trade hubs, food became a universal language. A foreign merchant offering dates or spiced nuts might be greeted with local wine or a pastry. These exchanges facilitated goodwill and made space for dialogue. Travelers noted that food, especially small gifts of it, could earn trust and open doors faster than words. Children were introduced to these traditions early. From a young age, they learned that sharing snacks was a way to make friends, express gratitude, and show respect. Whether at school on the street or during religious instruction, small foods were passed between hands with intention and care. Importantly, the etiquette of snacking was understood by all. There were unspoken rules about when and how to share. Refusing a snack could be seen as impolite, while offering the last piece was considered noble. These social rituals made snacking more than nourishment. They turned it into a dance of respect and recognition. Food historians often speak of the commensal bond, the human connection forged through shared eating. In medieval times, this bond was especially vital. Communities were smaller lives, more interdependent, and survival often required cooperation. Sharing a crust of bread or a fig cake was not only kind, it was necessary. Even criminal justice systems acknowledged the social power of food. In some towns, minor disputes were settled by having the parties break bread together. In this way, a simple snack could symbolize forgiveness and restoration. In today's world where social interaction is increasingly digital and meals often rushed, revisiting the communal essence of medieval snacks offers a powerful reminder. Food, especially when shared, can be a foundation of trust, kinship, and peace. In our next and final section, we'll reflect on the enduring legacy of medieval snacking. How have these traditions shaped the way we snack today? What remnants remain in our kitchens, our celebrations, and our acts of kindness? In this final section, Point 8, we reflect on the enduring legacy of medieval snacking and how it still echoes in our kitchen celebrations and everyday routines. Though centuries have passed, many of the traditions, attitudes, and flavors from the Middle Ages continue to influence the way we snack today, sometimes without us even realizing it. Let's start with the most obvious legacy, the types of food themselves. Many of the ingredients used in medieval snacks remain staples in modern treats. Honey nuts, dried fruits, herbs, spices, cheese, and bread all continue to serve as foundational elements in our diets. Consider the modern granola bar, a combination of oats nuts, honey, and sometimes dried fruit. It's not too far removed from the kind of simple sustaining snacks a medieval traveler might carry. Even more direct is the continued popularity of pastries. From hand pies to fritters, these formats have barely changed. The meat pies sold in modern British bakeries, the Italian arancini, the Spanish empanada, or even a cinnamon sugar donut all trace their lineage back to medieval snack forms. The habit of wrapping a filling in dough for ease of transport and convenience is timeless and still delicious. Our snack habits also reflect medieval influences in when and why we eat. While modern culture tends to emphasize eating on the go, the roots of this practice go back to the markets and fairs of medieval towns. Street food vendors selling hot, ready-to-eat items were essentially running the first food trucks. Whether it was a farmer grabbing a meat-filled pasty or a pilgrim munching on dried figs, the idea of food for the journey remains strong today. Ritual and symbolism also persist. Many holiday snacks and sweets have medieval origins. Gingerbread, for instance, was once made with breadcrumbs and spiced honey, shaped into animals or saints. Today's gingerbread men and houses, though more refined, carry the same festive spirit. Holiday cookies. Easter breads and Christmas puddings all echo the old rhythm of feast and fast celebration and restraint. The influence of religion on eating habits, particularly fasting, also lingers in some cultures. While not everyone today fasts for religious reasons, practices like meatless Fridays or giving up certain foods for Lent can be traced directly to medieval Christian customs. The idea of adapting meals and snacks to fit spiritual needs has stood the test of time. Social customs surrounding snacking are another clear connection. Offering a snack to a guest bringing food as a gift or sharing sweets at a celebration are traditions as old as medieval hospitality. Whether it's a neighbor dropping off banana bread or a host placing a snack tray on the table, we are still engaging in the same ritual of generosity and care. Some of the specific snack types have even retained their cultural identities. Take pretzels, for example. These were originally baked in monasteries and given as rewards to children for learning prayers. Their distinctive shape was said to represent arms folded in prayer. Today, pretzels are a beloved snack around the world, often still associated with festivals and fairs. Marzipan, too, has survived the centuries almost unchanged. This sweet almond paste, once a luxury reserved for nobility and served in elaborate shapes during feasts, is now a staple in European bakeries and a common ingredient in holiday treats. Even the art of shaping marzipan into fruits or animals is still practiced, especially around Christmas. The idea of comfort food. A snack that soothes, pleases, and uplifts is also inherited from the past. A monk nibbling on dried fruit between prayers, or a farmer enjoying a honey cake after a long day, understood this as well as we do. The emotional role of snacks as something more than nourishment has never really changed. Modern marketing strategies have likewise borrowed medieval ideas. The symbolic power of food, whether as a gesture of goodwill, a mark of celebration, or a tool for connection, is used constantly in advertising. Snack commercials often show people bonding, relaxing, or celebrating with food, echoing the social and emotional narratives of medieval snacking. Even packaging and presentation reflect a medieval mindset. Just as nobles once displayed their pastries on silver platters or molded their sweets into elaborate shapes, modern snacks are often packaged to appeal visually and communicate quality warmth or indulgence. Attractive wrappings, personalized containers, and limited edition treats all speak to the same impulse to make snacks feel special. Food tourism and heritage cuisine are other arenas where medieval snack culture thrives. Museums, historic reenactments, and food festivals often include medieval cooking demos or recipe tastings. People are increasingly curious about what their ancestors ate, and snacks offer an easy entry point into that exploration. Baking a medieval honey cake or making almond milk at home provides a hands-on way to connect with the past. At a deeper level, medieval snack culture reminds us to slow down and savor. In a world driven by efficiency and speed, looking back shows us a time when snacks were made by hand, shared with care, and enjoyed in meaningful moments. While it's not always realistic to return to those rhythms, adopting a little of that mindfulness in our modern routines can be deeply enriching. In conclusion, the legacy of medieval snacking is alive in our recipes, rituals, and relationships. The way we snack today, what we eat when we eat it, and how we share it, bears the imprint of a past where food was central to identity, culture, and community. Whether we realize it or not, every bite carries history. So, next time you enjoy a simple snack, be it a warm pastry, a handful of almonds, or a slice of fruit, remember that you're participating in a tradition that stretches back centuries. The tastes may have evolved, but the spirit remains the same: nourishment, connection, and joy. While Point 8 explored the lasting legacy of medieval snacks, Point 9 delves into how these traditions have inspired a renewed interest in historical food culture and experimental archaeology. More than a nostalgic look back, this movement represents a serious and growing effort to reconstruct, understand, and experience the culinary world of the past, one bite at a time. Experimental archaeology in the realm of food involves recreating historical recipes using period-appropriate ingredients, tools, and techniques. It's more than simply cooking old meals. It's about investigating how people in the past prepared, preserved, and consumed food. Through this approach, researchers, chefs, and enthusiasts uncover valuable insights into medieval life, economy, trade, and even science. One of the most active communities within this niche is made up of food historians and reenactors who regularly cook medieval snacks at fairs, educational events, and online platforms. These demonstrations bring to life how fritters were fried over open flames, how spices were ground using stone mortars, or how pastry coffins were formed to hold savory fillings. By engaging with these processes, modern people don't just learn history, they feel it, smell it, and taste it. Medieval cookbooks like The Form of Cury from England or Le Viandier from France are now available in translation and have become sources of inspiration for home cooks and scholars alike. These manuscripts are filled with recipes for snacks such as fruit pastes, spiced nuts, meat pastries, and honeyed confections. Often vague and poetic in their instructions, they require interpretation and adaptation, making the act of cooking them a creative and intellectual exercise. Recreating these recipes invites deeper questions. What kind of flour did they use? Was their honey as sweet as ours? How did climate and soil affect the flavor of herbs? These questions lead cooks into a broader understanding of agricultural practices, trade routes, and even medieval ecology. For example, when attempting to make authentic almond milk, one might explore the trade networks that brought almonds from the Mediterranean to Northern Europe. In recent years, digital platforms have expanded access to this knowledge. YouTube channels, food blogs, and podcasts now share medieval recipes, cooking methods, and historical context with audiences around the world. Some channels dedicate entire series to recreating snacks from specific centuries or regions. These platforms also allow people to share results, variations, and commentary, creating a collaborative living archive of culinary exploration. Academic institutions and museums have also embraced this approach. Universities with medieval studies programs often include food as part of their cultural curriculum. Some museums now feature interactive exhibits or live cooking stations where visitors can watch and sample medieval dishes. These experiences are especially effective in engaging young people and encouraging cross-generational learning. Restaurants and chefs have also gotten involved. Pop-up dining events with medieval themes have gained popularity, offering guests a chance to dine on dishes based on historical recipes. Though adapted for modern palates, these menus often feature versions of traditional snacks like cheese fritters, onion tarts, and spiced wine. Some high-end restaurants have even incorporated medieval flavors into contemporary cuisine, creating a fusion that both honors and reimagines the past. Beyond formal events, individuals and families are integrating medieval snacks into their own lives. Home bakers are trying their hand at ginger-spiced honey cakes, while history buffs experiment with their own pottages and pies. Some people even observe medieval feast days or fasts as a way to reconnect with ancestral rhythms and spiritual traditions. The movement also has a sustainability aspect. Medieval cooking relied heavily on local, seasonal, and preserved ingredients, a philosophy increasingly relevant in today's conversations around food ethics and environmental responsibility. By recreating these snacks, people rediscover old methods of conservation, from drying and fermenting to pickling and smoking. They also become more aware of food waste, resourcefulness, and the creative use of what's on hand. There's also a sensory and emotional benefit to engaging with medieval snack culture. The hands-on, time-intensive nature of preparing these foods fosters mindfulness and presence. Grinding spices, kneading dough, or stirring over a fire can feel meditative, connecting us to a slower, more intentional way of life. Sharing the finished product with friends or family can deepen that connection, turning a historical exercise into a memorable and meaningful experience. Importantly, this resurgence isn't just about recreating the past, it's about dialogue between then and now. As people revive these old recipes, they also adapt them, adding new flavors, adjusting for allergies, or presenting them in modern formats. This blend of historical respect and contemporary creativity mirrors how cultures have always evolved by holding on to what works and reimagining the rest. In this way, medieval snacks have become more than artifacts. They are dynamic elements of cultural storytelling and shared experience. Each loaf of medieval bread or bowl of lentil pottage becomes a conversation with history, an exploration of identity, and a gesture of continuity. Looking ahead, the popularity of historical cooking is likely to grow. As more people seek meaningful connections to the past, food will remain a powerful medium. Whether in a professional kitchen, a classroom, or a backyard fire pit, the legacy of medieval snacks will continue to be tasted, celebrated, and reinterpreted. In the next section, we'll consider how medieval snacks have been portrayed in popular media, from films and novels to video games, and how these portrayals influence our modern understanding of the past. Building on our exploration of real-world revivals, Point 10 takes us into the realm of imagination, how medieval snacks are portrayed in popular media, and how these portrayals shape contemporary perceptions of the Middle Ages. From epic fantasy films to best-selling novels and immersive video games, fictional depictions of food. Especially snacks and simple meals offer vivid, if sometimes inaccurate, glimpses into the medieval table. Let's begin with film and television. Period dramas and fantasy epics like Game of Thrones, The Last Kingdom, The Witcher, and The Name of the Rose often use food as a storytelling tool. Scenes featuring mead halls, roadside inns, and market stalls frequently show characters eating bread cheese apples, meat pies, or bowls of stew. These items aren't just background props. They help establish mood, social class, and the daily realities of medieval life. A soldier biting into hard bread by the fire, or a noblewoman savoring candied nuts speaks volumes about character and setting. However, these portrayals often simplify or romanticize the actual food culture of the period. Bread is typically white and fluffy, when in reality most medieval bread was coarse and dark. Meats are shown sizzling on open flames, but roasting large cuts of meat was a luxury many couldn't afford. Still, the depiction of snacks as warm, rustic, and communal helps audiences connect emotionally to a distant past, even if the historical accuracy is fuzzy. In novels, especially historical fiction and fantasy, food plays a similar role. Authors like Bernard Cornwell, Ken Follett, and George R.R. Martin use food to create immersive sensory experiences. A character tearing into a meat pasty or sipping spiced wine not only grounds the story in time and place, but also provides texture to the world building. Martin, in particular, is known for his elaborate descriptions of feasts, often inspired by medieval banquet records. These scenes frequently include snacks like honeyed locusts, meat-stuffed pastries, and wheels of cheese, many drawn directly from or adapted from historical sources. Video games, too, have joined this storytelling tradition. In games such as The Elder Scrolls Kingdom Come Deliverance, The Witcher 3, and Assassin's Creed Valhalla, players encounter food both as atmospheric detail and functional gameplay. Bread stews, berries, cheeses, and roasted meats appear in taverns, marketplaces, and character inventories. Sometimes, food restores health or provides temporary boosts, subtly reinforcing its role as comfort and sustenance. Some games go even further, allowing players to prepare or gather food, reinforcing the rhythms of medieval life. In Kingdom Come Deliverance, for instance, players must manage hunger and health by choosing what and when to eat. Meals and snacks reflect the real historical conditions of Bohemia in the 15th century, incorporating rye bread root vegetables and dried meats far from the glamour of fantasy and closer to reality. Social media has also played a role in spreading medieval food culture through fiction-inspired content. Fans recreate meals from favorite franchises using medieval-style ingredients and presentation. YouTube channels, TikToks, and Instagram Reels are filled with attempts to make feasts from Westeros or tavern-style snacks, blending imagination with historical curiosity. These digital reenactments spark interest and lead many viewers to investigate what medieval people actually ate. The influence of these portrayals is significant. They shape what we think medieval life looked like, smelled like, and tasted like. They introduce the idea that food was central to medieval experience, which is historically accurate, but they also risk reinforcing myths. For example, the overrepresentation of meat, sugar, and alcohol gives the impression that medieval diets were richer than they were for the average person. That said, popular media also provides a powerful gateway to deeper exploration. Many food historians and educators use these portrayals as entry points for critical discussion. A feast scene in The Witcher might inspire a classroom lesson on class-based food access. A viral recipe video for medieval meat pies might spark a family's attempt to cook one from a real historical manuscript. There is also growing interest among creators to consult historians and chefs when designing food scenes. Shows like Vikings and games like Assassin's Creed have begun to prioritize authenticity in their depictions, sometimes even hiring culinary consultants. This reflects a broader trend in entertainment, a move toward realism, not only in visuals, but in the very flavors of fictional worlds. In this way, medieval snacks live not just in history books or kitchens, but in the collective imagination. Whether accurately portrayed or not, they help connect audiences with the past in an immediate, visceral way. The act of biting into a rustic loaf or sipping from a tankard, even in fiction, creates a shared emotional link with characters and cultures from long ago. Ultimately, media portrayals of medieval food snacks in particular are both creative interpretations and cultural touchstones. They may not always be precise, but they keep medieval food traditions visible, accessible, and emotionally resonant. They remind us that eating has always been more than survival. It's been a way of expressing identity, telling stories, and forging connections across generations. In our next and final section, we'll wrap up the series by offering key takeaways, reflections, and ideas for continuing to explore medieval foodways in personal, educational, and creative settings. In this final section, Point 11, we bring together the many threads of our journey through the world of medieval snacks. From humble oatcakes to elaborately spiced marzipan, these foods were far more than sustenance. They were reflections of faith-class culture and creativity. What we eat when we eat and how we eat has always told a story. The story of medieval snacking is one of resilience, community, and tradition, echoing across centuries and into our own lives today. First and foremost, we've seen how snacking was shaped by the rhythms of life in the Middle Ages, the agricultural calendar, the church's fasting and feasting cycles, and the daily routines of labor and rest. Snacks provided fuel between long hours of work, comfort during religious observances, and joy during festivals. The simple act of breaking bread, passing a tart, or sipping spiced ale was both ordinary and sacred. We also explored the deep divides created by class. While nobles enjoyed imported spices, sugar confections, and artistic food presentation, common folk relied on hearty practical snacks like nuts, legumes, and bread. But despite these disparities, snacking was a universal human experience. Every class, region, and faith group participated in their own way, using what was available and meaningful to them. From bustling market stalls in Paris to monastic kitchens in Bohemia, from a shepherd's foraged berries to a queen's almond-studded pastries, every bite carried purpose. And these bites connected people not just to nourishment, but to each other. Snacks were offered in hospitality, gifted in courtship, exchanged in diplomacy, and shared in labor. They were acts of generosity, love, and alliance. We looked at the evolution of snack habits and how they eventually paved the way for modern convenience food. We explored how regional differences gave rise to enduring flavors. Pretzels in Germany, chickpea fritters in Sicily, sweet cheese pastries in France. We examined how religious and seasonal cycles dictated what could be eaten and when. And we discovered how these ancient customs still echo in today's holiday treats, meatless Fridays, and street food culture. Perhaps most inspiring is how medieval snacks continue to be rediscovered and reimagined today. Through experimental archaeology, digital platforms, cookbooks, museum exhibits, and home kitchens, modern people are cooking their way into the past. We are learning not just the recipes, but the rhythms, values, and joys that accompanied them. In doing so, we keep those traditions alive, not as museum pieces, but as living practices. Popular media, too, has played its part in keeping these stories relevant. While not always historically accurate depictions of medieval snacks in games, books, and films have sparked widespread interest, they've inspired creative projects, family meals, and educational opportunities. They've reminded us that food is a gateway to empathy and imagination. So, what are the takeaways from this series? Medieval snacks were more than just food. They were expressions of culture, community, and identity. The ways in which people prepared, shared, and experienced snacks reveal much about their lives across class lines, geographical borders, and religious divides. Many of the snacks we enjoy today have deep roots in medieval tradition, whether it's a festive cake, a savory pie, or a handful of spiced nuts. Reviving and reinterpreting these foods can foster connection not only to the past, but also to each other. For those eager to explore, further consider recreating a medieval snack night with friends or family using adapted recipes, visiting local museums or historical societies for food-themed exhibitions, reading translated medieval cookbooks, or following digital creators who specialize in historical cooking. Reflecting on your own snacking habits and how they relate to tradition, celebration, or comfort. Ultimately, learning about medieval junk food reminds us that food is one of the oldest forms of human storytelling. Every bite we take can be a thread that links us to someone somewhere sometime. Whether you're biting into a 21st century croissant or a 14th century cheese fritter, you're part of a much longer, richer tale. Thank you for joining this journey through crumbs and crusts, herbs and hearths. May your curiosity stay warm and your table always be shared. Although our formal journey may have concluded in point 11.12, opens the door to what lies ahead, the future of medieval food studies and the role of everyday people in preserving and evolving these traditions. Rather than a closing statement, this final reflection is an invitation, a call to action. For anyone inspired by the tastes, stories, and rituals of the medieval world to become active participants in keeping these foodways alive. The future of medieval food exploration is more accessible than ever. With the digital age offering global access to academic databases, recipe reconstructions, historic texts, and tutorial videos, medieval food has leapt beyond the walls of the university and into kitchens, classrooms, and communities. You no longer need to be a scholar or chef to engage with it. You only need curiosity, basic ingredients, and a willingness to learn. More collaborative projects are emerging, where historians, archaeologists, chefs, and educators co-create experiences that bridge the past and present. Interactive workshops, themed cooking classes, and school curricula that incorporate food history are making these topics tangible and fun for learners of all ages. For many students, biting into a honey cake or rolling chickpea fritters brings medieval history to life in ways textbooks never could. In the realm of education, culinary history is being recognized not just as an enrichment topic, but as a serious lens for understanding human society. Institutions are integrating food into broader discussions on trade religion, class ecology, and technology. Because food touches every part of life, studying it unlocks new insights into old questions. What did it mean to be poor or powerful, to celebrate or sacrifice too? Eat alone or in community? Culturally, there's a growing hunger for slow, meaningful, hands-on practices in an increasingly fast and digitized world. The methods used in medieval snack preparation, grinding by hand, baking with natural yeast, preserving through drying or fermenting, are being rediscovered not only for historical interest, but for their environmental and wellness benefits. More people are embracing medieval-inspired values like seasonal eating, zero-waste kitchens, and food as communal ritual. Even in the culinary world, where innovation often races forward, there is room to look back. Chefs are exploring medieval techniques to inspire modern dishes, blending ancient flavors with contemporary presentation. Restaurants that celebrate heritage cuisine are finding that guests are not only open to, but deeply moved by meals that tell a story. The humble lentil pottage, or honey-dipped fritter, presented thoughtfully becomes a conversation starter, a bridge between time periods, and an emotional experience. The same is true for home cooks who are discovering that preparing and sharing historical snacks with friends or family can be both grounding and joyful. It creates space for storytelling, for intergenerational dialogue, and for a slower, more attentive kind of hospitality. Hosting a medieval snack night or baking from an old recipe isn't just an activity, it's a small act of cultural stewardship. Looking further ahead, the next frontier may lie in how we document and pass on these revivals. As more people engage in recreating and reimagining medieval snacks, preserving that knowledge in accessible, inclusive, and dynamic ways becomes crucial. Cookbooks, blogs, podcasts, museum archives, and community memory projects all play a role. The goal isn't just to mimic the past, but to weave it meaningfully into the future. There's also a place for imagination in this work. As much as we seek authenticity, the spirit of medieval snacking was not rigid. It was adaptable, regional, creative. Encouraging playful experimentation, like fusing medieval and modern techniques, or creating new dishes based on old principles, keeps the tradition vibrant. It allows it to evolve without losing its soul. Ultimately, the question is not whether medieval snack culture is relevant. It is how we choose to engage with it. Will we let it live only in books and museums? Or will we continue to bake, taste, share, and innovate? If you followed this series, you're already part of the answer. Every story read, every recipe tried, every idea shared, helps ensure that this delicious piece of human history remains alive. So whether you're teaching a class, hosting a meal, writing a novel, or just preparing a simple treat with your hands, remember that you're part of something ancient and ongoing. May this be not an ending, but a beginning. The table is set, the past is calling, and there's still so much to taste. While Point 12 opened the door to future engagement, Point 13 turns our focus inward, encouraging a personal reflection on what we've learned and how it might shift the way we view food history and even ourselves. In many ways, the journey through medieval snack culture isn't just about the past, it's also about how we live and connect in the present. At its heart, the study of food is the study of humanity. It invites us to ask not only what people ate, but why they ate it, how they prepared it, how it made them feel, and how it brought them together. When we look closely at something as specific as medieval snacks, we begin to see larger patterns about survival, celebration, identity, and care. There is something deeply grounding about rediscovering foods that existed long before our modern conveniences. When we realize that someone in a village 800 years ago once fried dough in animal fat and drizzled it with honey for a holy day treat, we see that joy, resourcefulness, and the need for comfort transcend time. We understand that across every generation, food has served as a balm, a reminder that we are human, and that life is worth savoring. This understanding can shape how we cook and eat today. It can prompt us to slow down, to pay more attention to where our food comes from, and to value the rituals that surround it. A slice of warm bread, a cup of spiced tea, or a shared treat with a friend can become more than a habit. They can become small ceremonies of connection. Reflecting on medieval snack culture also asks us to rethink our assumptions. We may think of the Middle Ages as a time of hardship and limitation, but in truth, it was also a time of great creativity. Cooks used every scrap of food, every available herb, every local tradition to craft meals that were resourceful, flavorful, and often beautiful. They experimented, adapted, and celebrated the art of making do. In today's world, where abundance often leads to waste and convenience sometimes dulls flavor, there is much to learn from these earlier approaches. Incorporating a medieval mindset into our kitchens might mean reducing waste, planning meals seasonally, or reviving forgotten recipes that use simple, honest ingredients. It might mean rethinking what counts as a proper snack and seeing value in foods that are handmade, humble, and rooted in tradition. This reflection extends beyond food into community. The medieval world was built on interdependence. People shared meals, exchanged ingredients, relied on their neighbors, and passed down recipes orally. Today, we can foster similar bonds by cooking together, exchanging cultural knowledge, and sharing food stories from our own families. In this way, the spirit of medieval snacking becomes a bridge between our ancestors and our neighbors. In fact, one of the most valuable lessons medieval snacking teaches us is how to cherish the act of gathering. Unlike today's grab-and-go culture, eating in the Middle Ages was often communal. Whether at a guild feast, a church gathering, or a humble shared meal in a peasant's cottage, food was rarely consumed in solitude. Recreating that sense of community, even with something as small as hosting a snack night with friends, helps restore the human side of eating that can so easily be lost. We might also take this as an opportunity to reflect on cultural humility. Every culture has its own snacking traditions, shaped by its own histories, climates, and beliefs. Engaging with medieval European snacks can serve as a starting point for exploring other culinary histories, learning about what people in ancient Persia, West Africa, or East Asia snacked on during the same time period. In doing so, we expand not only our palate, but our worldview. Most importantly, perhaps, is how engaging with medieval snacks reminds us that food is not just about nutrition, it is about meaning. A meal can be a memory. A recipe can be a legacy. A shared dish can be an act of love. The monks, bakers, travelers, and farmers of the medieval world may have lived in a very different time, but they understood this truth intimately. And we can too. So, as you continue your own journey, whether you return to the kitchen, delve into a historical novel, or simply sit down with a piece of bread and a cup of tea, carry these insights with you. Let the lessons of medieval snack culture enrich your table, your relationships, and your sense of wonder. History is not behind us. It is within us in every bite, every tradition, every small moment of gratitude shared over food. And it is ours to carry forward one mindful snack at a time. Point 14 turns our attention to the overlooked role of emotion and memory in shaping our experience of food, especially snacks. While much of our discussion so far has focused on ingredients, history, technique, and social meaning, we now explore the more personal terrain of how food, and particularly familiar snack rituals, carries emotional weight, evokes memory, and helps anchor identity over time. Think for a moment about your own favorite snack. Maybe it's a warm piece of bread, a slice of pie, or something sweet from childhood. Why does it matter? Likely not just because it tastes good, but because of how it makes you feel. Perhaps it reminds you of someone you love. Perhaps it transports you to a specific moment in time, a holiday, a quiet afternoon, a conversation in the kitchen. This is the invisible thread that binds food to memory and emotion. Medieval people were no different. They too had favorite foods. Special recipes, passed down treats associated with festival snacks that reminded them of home. A honey cake made by a grandmother. A cheese tart served at a wedding. A fritter bought at a fair. These weren't just calories. They were vessels of memory, tradition, and emotion. The sensory nature of food, its smell, texture, and warmth, makes it one of the most powerful triggers of memory. Medieval snacks, often prepared over wood fires or with fragrant herbs and spices, created deeply embedded sensory moments. The smell of roasted nuts at a market, or the taste of a plum tart during harvest, might stay with someone their whole life, just as the smell of cinnamon or the sound of crackling oil might instantly bring you back to your childhood today. This emotional power of food is amplified in times of change, hardship, or transition. In the Middle Ages, when war, disease, or migration disrupted communities, the ability to recreate a familiar snack could offer comfort and stability. It could affirm one's cultural identity and restore a sense of home even in exile. Food rituals anchored people through uncertain times. Even today, when families bake old recipes or replicate traditional snacks during holidays, they are performing acts of cultural and emotional continuity. These moments remind us who we are and where we come from. They allow memory to be savored, not just recalled. Many families have a treasured recipe that only appears once a year, and its presence on the table signals that a special moment has arrived. In some cases, recipes span generations, their origins long forgotten, but their emotional impact as strong as ever. In classrooms, this connection between food and emotion is increasingly being explored through intergenerational storytelling. Children interview elders about traditional snacks, recreating them together, and recording the stories they carry. In doing so, they learn not only how to cook, but how to listen, remember, and honor the past. Educators are finding that food opens doors that textbooks cannot, creating moments of empathy, understanding, and cultural appreciation. Artists and writers also use food memory as a tool for reflection. A poem about a shared plum, a painting of a bread oven, a memoir that begins with a pie crust. These creative works help translate the inexpressible emotional depth that food contains into something shareable, visible, and enduring. Literature in particular has long used food as a metaphor for longing, belonging, and memory. Across cultures, we find remarkably similar traditions that link snacks to stories and emotions. In Japan, a piece of mochi might remind someone of New Year's morning at their grandmother's house. In Mexico, Pan de Muerto connects families to loved ones during Dia de los Muertos. In the Middle East, dates shared during Ramadan become symbols of spiritual connection. Medieval snacks played this same role, binding communities through shared taste, texture, and time. Point 14 reminds us that snacks are never just snacks. They are memory keepers. They are emotional anchors. They are edible heritage. They contain the laughter of a festival, the quiet of a morning table, the nervousness of a first meeting, the warmth of a return home. These emotional resonances travel with us, resurfacing when we least expect them. So, as you continue to explore the world of medieval food or your own family traditions, pay attention to how you feel when you cook, when you taste, and when you share. You might find that the heart of history is not only in the pages of old cookbooks or the facts of trade routes, but in the quiet, tender act of remembering through food. Consider writing down your own food memories, preserving not just ingredients and methods, but emotions and stories. Share these memories at meals. Listen to the stories of others, and that perhaps is the most lasting flavor of all, the reminder that food connects us not only to those we eat with, but to those who came before, and those who will follow. Point 15 builds directly on the emotional and sensory weight of food by examining how food rituals, especially surrounding snacks, help shape identity at the individual familial and cultural levels. If memory makes a snack, meaningful ritual gives it rhythm. Across time, geography, and social class, the repeated intentional act of preparing, sharing, and consuming certain foods in specific ways reinforces not just memory, but belonging. Ritual is more than habit. It is a practice imbued with purpose and often tied to larger systems of belief or tradition. In the context of medieval snacks, food rituals often followed the cycles of the religious year, agricultural calendar, or local customs. Preparing fritters before Lent, sharing honey cakes at harvest, or baking cheese tarts for weddings weren't merely tasks. They were rituals of transition and celebration. They marked endings and beginnings. They helped communities process change, create continuity, and find comfort in repetition. These food rituals were typically communal. Families and neighbors gathered to cook, children learned recipes by observation and participation, and knowledge passed not through writing but through doing. It's in this embodied knowledge, grinding spices by hand-shaping dough, just so, timing the heat by intuition, that culture was preserved. Even the simplest snack could become sacred when linked to ritual. In modern life, where schedules are fractured and time is scarce, food rituals are often relegated to holidays or special occasions, but their emotional impact remains profound. A birthday cake, a Sunday morning pancake ritual, or a shared pot of tea at dusk carries forward the same essence that medieval snack rituals held. It is through this intentionality that we reconnect with ourselves and with others. Let's consider how this plays out within families. For many households today, the most treasured food rituals are not tied to gourmet meals, but to snacks. A grandparent always has shortbread in a tin. A friend bakes banana bread during every first snowfall. A parent packs the same lunchbox treat year after year. These patterns, like medieval traditions, become identity markers. They say, "This is who we are. This is how we love." Culturally, snack rituals also serve as bridges between generations and between diasporas and homelands. In immigrant communities especially, food rituals help preserve language, faith, and connection to heritage. A Syrian family in Berlin might fry date-filled pastries every Eid. A Polish family in Chicago might bake poppy seed rolls for Christmas Eve. Though the setting changes, the snack grounds them. In medieval Europe, snack rituals served similar purposes. During periods of migration, conquest, or famine, certain recipes and methods traveled with people. Some rituals faded or merged with others. Others survived intact. Passed from grandmothers to granddaughters, from monks to novices, from merchants to apprentices. In this way, food rituals became repositories of resilience. The act of repetition also offers psychological comfort. In both medieval and modern contexts, repeating a food ritual can reduce anxiety, promote emotional grounding, and reinforce personal agency. Making a familiar snack in a time of grief or transition Something many medieval people did during mourning or illness was a way to say, life continues. There is still sweetness. We remember and we remain. Ritual also links food with the sacred. Medieval monks prayed before meals, but they also saw baking, brewing, and even snacking as part of a spiritual life. Preparing almond milk or stewing lentils was a devotional act done with care and mindfulness. The same can be true today. Cooking with intention, sharing food generously, and pausing to savor flavors all echo the contemplative traditions of the past. Furthermore, snack rituals can shape identity beyond the home. In schools, workplaces, and social groups, shared snacks form bonds and routines. The office donut. On Fridays, the after-school granola bar, the book club's tea and biscuits. These modern rituals echo the guild feasts, market day breads, and communal fast breaking of the medieval world. Through them, strangers become companions. For creative individuals, ritual around snacks also supports productivity and expression. Writers, artists, and musicians often develop snack habits tied to their creative process. A certain tea before writing, a handful of nuts during a painting session. In monasteries, monks used snacks in the same way as part of rhythms that alternated work and reflection. The human brain, then and now, thrives on structure and reward. Reintroducing snack rituals into our own lives can be transformative. It can mean bringing back an old family recipe or inventing a new one. It can mean setting aside time each week to bake or prepare something slowly. It can mean inviting friends to join in a regular shared snack, even virtually. These small acts build connection and deepen presence. As communities seek to rebuild cohesion in an increasingly disconnected world, food rituals offer one of the most accessible and meaningful tools. They require no translation. They transcend age, language, and background. Whether in a medieval hamlet or a modern city, people come together through food. So, what might your snack ritual be? Perhaps it's one rooted in your ancestry. Perhaps it's one you begin today. Either way, remember that with each repetition, you are anchoring memory, emotion, and identity. You are not just feeding your body. You're nurturing your sense of belonging. Point 15 reminds us that while recipes may change and ingredients may shift, the essence of ritual remains to nourish not only hunger, but the soul. And in a world that moves fast and forgets quickly, the quiet repetition of a snack made with care may be one of the most enduring acts of remembrance and love. In the next section, we will explore how food and storytelling have always been intertwined. How the stories we tell about snacks, their origins and their meanings, help pass on values, shape heritage, and create shared myths that endure across generations. Point 16 builds naturally from the idea of ritual and belonging by exploring the deep and timeless connection between food and storytelling. If rituals give snacks rhythm and repetition, and memory gives them emotion, then stories give them voice. Across medieval Europe, food was not only eaten, it was narrated. Recipes, festivals, and even simple snacks carried stories that explained their origins, signified their meaning, and preserved their place in collective memory. To understand this connection, we must look at how oral tradition shaped medieval culture. In a largely illiterate society, history was preserved not on paper, but in song, legend, and tale. And just as heroes had epic quests, and saints performed miracles, foods, too, had origin stories. These stories weren't always historically accurate, but they weren't meant to be. They were meant to teach, to remember, and to create a shared understanding of place identity and value. Take, for example, the story of pretzels. One popular legend claims that a monk in southern France invented the pretzel to reward children for learning their prayers. The distinctive looped shape, it is said, represents crossed arms in prayer. Whether or not this is factually true, the story gave spiritual significance to a simple snack and helped anchor it in religious life. In monasteries and towns alike, pretzels became symbols of piety, patience, and reward. Another common motif was the snack of survival breads, or cakes said to have sustained villagers during famine or siege. In one German tale, a woman fed her starving neighbors with barley cakes baked on hot stones, earning a reputation for sainthood. Similar legends are found across Europe of miraculous apples found by monks of honey cakes left at altars of pies delivered by animals to hungry children. These stories weren't just charming, they validated food as a sacred gift and an emblem of compassion. Many snacks were tied to saints' days or local legends. In Sicily, for example, fava beans were considered lucky because, according to legend, they saved the population from starvation during a drought. Even simple legumes became tokens of divine favor. In medieval England, soul cakes were baked and given to the poor on All Souls' Day in exchange for prayers for the dead. The story surrounding the cake, its meaning and purpose was as important as its taste. Through storytelling, food took on metaphorical power. A honeyed fritter could represent the sweetness of divine grace. A hard crust of bread might stand for humility or endurance. These metaphors were passed down in lullabies, sermons, folk tales, and family lore. And because they were easy to remember and easy to repeat, they endured. Just as a recipe can travel from one generation to the next, so can the stories told while preparing it. In noble households, storytelling accompanied banquets and feast days. Bards or musicians would entertain guests with tales of mythical lands and brave ancestors, often as plates of symbolic food were served. The dishes themselves might reference these tales, wild boar representing strength or almond confections arranged like castles. In this way, storytelling wasn't just entertainment, it was a way of reinforcing the meaning behind the food and the values of the household. Storytelling also functioned as an educational tool. Parents taught children how to behave, how to honor faith, and how to value community through stories told during meals. "Don't waste bread," a mother might say, or "the spirit of Saint Martha will scold you in your dreams." "Always share your apples," an elder might warn, as Brother Peter once did with the beggar who turned out to be an angel. These were moral lessons embedded in culinary practice. Even festivals often revolved around a central story, with food acting as the physical representation of its lesson. Carnival, for example, was a time of indulgence before Lent, but it was also wrapped in narratives about order and chaos, spirit and flesh. The foods, fried dough, candied nuts, sweet wine reflected these themes. They weren't chosen randomly. They embodied the story. In today's world, this connection between food and story still exists, though we may not always notice it. When we say, "This pie is just like my grandmother used to make," we are invoking a story. When we bring snacks to a celebration and say, "These are traditional at New Year's in my family," we are preserving lore. Even the act of naming a dish can carry a narrative: wartime cake, Saint Day bread, or pilgrim cookies. And just as in medieval times, these stories help us belong. They remind us of our ancestors, our values, and our place within a wider cultural and historical narrative. Food stories are also how we include others. When we teach a friend to make a family snack and share the story behind it, we are inviting them into our heritage. In classrooms and museums, educators increasingly use food stories to teach history. Rather than starting with dates or battles, they begin with a recipe and ask, "Who made this? Why did they make it? What does it tell us about their world?" This approach makes history more tangible, personal, and memorable. Writers and filmmakers have long recognized the storytelling power of food. A snack passed between characters can carry emotional weight, symbolize a bond, or spark a flashback. In novels, a pastry might be the trigger for an entire chapter of recollection. In films, a shared piece of bread might represent peace, forgiveness, or community. These are modern echoes of medieval storytelling tradition carried through new media. Point 16 reminds us that the stories surrounding food are just as nourishing as the food itself. They teach us who we are and who we want to be. They connect us across generations and geographies. They turn snacks into symbols, meals into milestones, and kitchens into sanctuaries. So, as you share a snack, whether medieval in origin or modern in adaptation, consider the story it tells. Where did it come from? Who first made it for you? What memory does it carry, and what new memory might it create? In the next section, we'll explore how these food stories have not only survived, but evolved in today's digital age, and how the internet has become a new marketplace monastery and hearth for sharing snacks and stories alike. Point 17 carries us from the fireside of oral tradition to the glowing screens of the modern digital world. As we saw in Point 16, food stories once passed down through memory, family, and community are now experiencing a renaissance through online platforms. In a way, the internet has become the new village square, the new medieval market, where recipes, rituals, and the narratives tied to them continue to live, evolve, and connect people across borders and time zones. The digital age has transformed the way we share stories, and food has become one of its most potent mediums. With the rise of social media blogs, YouTube channels, podcasts, and online cooking communities, food storytelling is more visible, dynamic, and participatory than ever before. What once required a gathering of neighbors can now reach millions with a single click. And within that click, the essence of medieval snack culture, its symbolism, its ritual, its communal meaning can thrive. Start with video content. YouTube and TikTok have birthed a wave of historical cooking channels where creators experiment with ancient and medieval recipes. Some wear period clothing, others cook over open fires. Many read directly from medieval manuscripts while preparing dishes like cheese fritters, lentil pottages, almond tarts, or rosewater cakes. But these videos do more than demonstrate, they narrate. Creators explain the cultural context of the food, share historical anecdotes, and reflect on their personal experiences with the dish. In this way, the video becomes not only a tutorial, but a modern bard's tale. Meanwhile, Instagram and Pinterest serve as visual archives of food memories. A photo of a spiced fig tart paired with a caption about a grandmother's kitchen or a holiday tradition becomes a miniature digital heirloom. Hashtags like Satwick historical cooking, Ashash medieval feast, or ancestral recipes help form niche communities where users swap notes, ask questions, and celebrate each other's culinary heritage. Blogs offer longer-form storytelling. Writers publish essays that blend personal memory, historical research, and recipe adaptation. A post might begin, "When I first tasted elderflower syrup, I thought of the hedgerows in my childhood village," and continue into a discussion of its role in medieval Europe. These stories serve a dual function, preserving culinary knowledge and validating personal identity through the lens of history. Importantly, these digital formats allow for participation and collaboration. Readers comment with their own family variations of a snack. Viewers try recipes and post their results. Creators adapt dishes based on accessibility or dietary needs, sparking conversation about authenticity, adaptation, and inclusion. In doing so, they echo the flexibility of medieval food traditions, which also varied across region, season, and circumstance. Podcasts have emerged as a powerful medium for food storytelling as well. Shows like Gastropod, The History of English Food, or Tasting History, often dedicate episodes to medieval ingredients feasts or kitchen customs. These audio journeys bring listeners into the textures and tastes of the past, allowing them to cook along or simply imagine the experience. Just as medieval minstrels once told stories by the fire podcast hosts, now spin culinary tales in our earbuds. Online courses and digital museum exhibits also play a part in preserving medieval food culture. Platforms like Coursera or university-based programs offer classes on historical foodways, often including downloadable recipe booklets and video walkthroughs. Museums like the British Museum or the Jorvik Viking Center provide interactive content exploring medieval dining tools, banquet customs, and preserved recipes. Beyond platforms, digital food storytelling also serves as cultural bridge work. Diaspora communities use food blogs and recipe videos to teach younger generations about their heritage. Language is passed through kneading dough. Identity is affirmed through the naming of spices. For children of immigrants, making a traditional snack with an online guide can be a deeply validating experience. It says, "You belong. This is your story too." This sense of inclusivity extends to people who may have been excluded from traditional food heritage spaces. The internet enables people with allergies, disabilities, or limited access to certain ingredients to adapt and share medieval-inspired recipes in ways that fit their lives. The sharing of those adaptations doesn't dilute the tradition, it expands it, just as it did in medieval times when cooks worked with what they had. What's more, digital platforms allow for multi-sensory immersion. A YouTube video might include music from medieval instruments. A blog might embed images of illuminated manuscripts. An Instagram story might include time-lapse footage of dough rising beside a hearth. These layered experiences recreate the richness of medieval food culture in a modern technological format. At the heart of all this lies the same impulse that guided medieval bakers' monks and grandmothers, the desire to connect, to cook with care, to share what nourishes, and to tell stories that make meaning from ingredients. Though our kitchens may now include induction burners, smartphones, and convection ovens, the soul of the process remains timeless. Point 17 reminds us that the internet, despite its speed, noise, and distractions, can also be a contemplative space, a space of remembering, of learning, and of storytelling. A place where you can find a 14th century pie recipe, try it in your 21st century kitchen, and post a photo that connects you with someone in another country doing the same. This is not so different from a medieval marketplace where cooks swapped ideas, monks preserved culinary records, and travelers shared news and bread. Only now, the square is virtual, and the fire that lights our stories is digital. So next time you scroll past a recipe, pause. Ask yourself, what story is it telling? Where does it come from? What memory might it create? And if you're moved, share your own. Because every story posted, every recipe shared, every snack documented is part of a living archive, a medieval manuscript written in code and carried by connection. In the next section, we will explore how reviving medieval snacks today might offer not just culinary pleasure, but healing. How cooking and sharing these foods can reconnect us with our bodies, our ancestors, and each other in profound and restorative ways. Point 18 continues from the digital village square into the personal and emotional realm, exploring how reviving and sharing medieval snacks today can be more than an act of culinary curiosity. It can be healing. As we engage with ancient recipes, rekindle family traditions, or gather friends around a hearth, we participate in acts that nurture the body and the spirit. Food, especially traditional snacks rooted in memory and culture, can serve as medicine for modern disconnection, anxiety, and fragmentation. We live in a time of great acceleration. Information moves at lightning speed. Our meals are often rushed, solitary, or functional. Many people feel unmoored from their roots, disconnected from community, and fatigued by a world that prizes productivity over presence. Amid this landscape, the slow, tactile, sensory-rich process of making a medieval snack offers an antidote. Consider the process of baking medieval honey cakes. The act begins with gathering ingredients, flour, honey spices, measuring by hand, stirring with care. The scent of cloves and cinnamon rising from the oven evokes a different tempo, a slower, more grounded rhythm. For many, engaging with such rituals can reduce stress, evoke mindfulness, and offer a tangible way to re-inhabit one's own body. Cooking becomes a form of embodied memory, and each step is a way of returning to oneself. The therapeutic value of food preparation has long been recognized by therapists, caregivers, and healers. In recent years, cooking has been incorporated into wellness practices, trauma recovery, and even palliative care. The reasons are simple. Cooking engages all the senses, encourages focus, and creates an immediate, often satisfying result. When paired with ancestral or traditional recipes, the act takes on even deeper meaning. We are not just feeding ourselves, we are reconnecting with those who came before us. Reviving medieval snacks also restores a sense of agency and creativity. In a time when much of our food is prepackaged, mass-produced, and anonymous, returning to the origins of a recipe, figuring out how a 14th century fritter might have tasted, adapting it for today's kitchen invites curiosity and confidence. We become co-creators in a centuries-long culinary lineage. And in doing so, we reclaim our role not only as eaters, but as makers. There's healing too in sharing the process with others. Cooking medieval snacks with children, parents, or friends becomes a form of relational bonding. The kitchen becomes a site of storytelling, laughter, and attention. Recipes passed down or newly discovered become tools for intergenerational connection. A child rolling out dough beside a grandparent is not just learning a skill, they are building memory and identity. For people experiencing grief or loss, traditional cooking can offer a bridge between the present and the past. Preparing a recipe once made by a loved one, perhaps a spiced bread served at a family feast, becomes a way to honor memory and channel love. The senses carry us where words cannot. The aroma of a snack can open a floodgate of remembrance, and the act of eating it becomes a kind of communion. Even among communities, food revivals can be healing. Immigrant or diasporic communities, when gathered to cook ancestral snacks, often find strength in shared history. The flavors of home, preserved through centuries of migration, become sources of resilience. At festivals, cultural centers, or neighborhood potlucks, the act of cooking and eating together becomes a quiet resistance to erasure. It says we remember who we are. We are still here. There is also a physical healing element. Many medieval snack recipes rely on whole ingredients, nuts, grains, legumes, dried fruits, herbs. While they may have been indulgent for their time compared to modern ultra-processed snacks, they are often gentler on the body. Reintroducing such recipes into our diets can support health while satisfying deeper emotional and sensory needs. Some people recovering from eating disorders or disordered relationships with food find that traditional cooking offers a way back to trust and joy. Because these recipes are tied to culture, family, and ritual, they emphasize nourishment over control, pleasure over punishment. A warm fritter shared among friends becomes not a source of shame, but of comfort and delight. In communal and therapeutic settings, medieval snack preparation has been used in retreats, support groups, and workshops. Participants might gather to make pottage-shaped bread or steep herbal infusions. The simplicity and history of the recipes create a sense of containment and purpose. Cooking as a group becomes a metaphor for rebuilding, each person contributing to the whole. In spiritual contexts, too, food can be medicine. Monastic traditions viewed food as a sacred gift to be prepared and consumed with gratitude. Today, mindfulness-based eating practices draw from similar ideas, pausing before a bite, savoring texture and taste, acknowledging the hands and history behind the food. A modern person quietly eating a medieval biscuit while contemplating its origin may find themselves praying, remembering, or simply breathing more deeply. Point 18 invites us to see medieval snacks not as curiosities from another era, but as bridges back to wholeness. In the act of baking, sharing, and storytelling, we repair fractures between mind and body, past and present, self and community. Food becomes ritual. Ritual becomes healing. So whether you try an old recipe for the first time or return to a family favorite passed through generations, know that your hands are joining a long line of makers and menders. Each whisk of honey, each fold of dough, each shared bite is a quiet act of restoration. In the next and final section, we'll reflect on the broader cultural significance of medieval snack revival, how this movement, though rooted in history, speaks to some of our most pressing modern needs: slowness, connection, belonging, and care. Point 19 draws together the threads of healing memory, community, and culture into a larger tapestry by exploring the broader cultural significance of reviving medieval snacks. It considers how this movement, while grounded in culinary history, responds to some of the most urgent needs of our modern world: the need for slowness in a time of haste, for rootedness in a time of flux, for tactile engagement in a digital age, and for authentic connection in a fragmented society. Reviving medieval snacks is not simply a nostalgic exercise, it is in many ways an act of cultural and spiritual resilience. In an era defined by mass production, digital fatigue, and globalization, the turn toward traditional foods, and particularly those with deep historical roots, represents a desire to recover something more essential. It is a way of saying, let's remember what matters. Part of what draws people to medieval snack traditions is their simplicity. Most recipes require only a few ingredients: honey, flour, herbs, fruit, and basic tools. There is no reliance on industrial additives, complex machinery, or branded packaging. The process of making these foods is accessible, intuitive, and often forgiving. In that way, it speaks to a desire for clarity and control in a world that often feels overwhelming. These snacks also offer a kind of aesthetic and sensory counterbalance to modern life. They smell earthy, taste wholesome, and engage the senses slowly. A bite of cheese-stuffed pastry or a spoonful of spiced pottage doesn't overwhelm it grounds. It invites savoring contemplation presence. In reviving them, people are not just seeking old flavors, they are seeking old feelings. Culturally, the movement taps into growing public interest in sustainability and food ethics. Medieval snack recipes are by necessity based on seasonality and local sourcing. Before global shipping and refrigeration, ingredients had to be grown, gathered, or preserved within the region. This led to a cuisine that respected the rhythms of the earth. Reconnecting with these practices today supports not just historical education, but ecological consciousness. It reinforces a relationship with food that is seasonal, regional, and sustainable. Moreover, reviving these recipes contributes to the protection of intangible cultural heritage. UNESCO and other organizations increasingly recognize traditional foodways as critical components of cultural identity. Each fritter pie or tart carries with it the linguistic, religious, and regional expressions of the people who created and adapted it. In cooking these snacks, we become stewards of a heritage that is not fixed in glass cases, but alive in our kitchens. This cultural revival is especially poignant for younger generations who may feel cut off from ancestral roots. For many, cooking medieval snacks becomes a gateway into exploring family history, language migration, and forgotten customs. A simple honey cake can inspire questions. Where did our family come from? What did they eat? What stories did they tell? It becomes a form of cultural reawakening. This movement also invites more inclusive historical narratives. For centuries, history has focused on the powerful, the written, the monumental. But food history especially. Snack culture shifts the lens to the everyday, the domestic, the humble. It asks, what did the weavers eat at dusk? What did the children snack on before prayers? In doing so, it democratizes history. It honors the lives of women workers and communities often left out of textbooks. Public events and institutions are increasingly embracing this perspective. Museums hold historical food days. Libraries offer medieval cooking workshops. Schools include food history in their curriculums. These engagements create dynamic participatory ways to connect with the past. They transform history from a subject to a lived experience. At the same time, the revival allows for creative reinvention. Medieval snacks are not resurrected to be frozen in time. They are reimagined to live again. Bakers create gluten-free soul cakes. Chefs infuse modern ingredients into ancient techniques. Families blend traditions, crafting hybrid recipes that reflect both heritage and contemporary needs. This fluidity mirrors how food has always evolved. Importantly, this movement fosters intergenerational connection. Elders share recipes and memories. Younger people bring energy and experimentation. Together, they co-create a living culinary lineage. In a time when generational gaps are widening, food provides a language of love and continuity. On a societal level, reviving medieval snacks can support local economies and artisans. Farmers' markets, heritage bakeries. Small producers of heritage grains or heirloom fruits benefit when communities value traditional foodways. Culinary tourism, too, gains richness when it includes not just gourmet meals, but historical street food and peasant dishes with deep roots. Finally, this movement answers a spiritual yearning. Whether religious or not, many people today crave meaning, ritual, and rootedness. Making a snack tied to the harvest moon or the feast of St. Bridget isn't just quaint, it's grounding. It offers structure in a chaotic world. It allows people to mark time, celebrate seasons, and honor ancestors. It turns daily life into ceremony. Point 19 reminds us that reviving medieval snacks is not a backwards-looking project. It is forward-facing. It offers practical responses to environmental crises, cultural amnesia, social disconnection, and emotional burnout. It says, come back to the kitchen. Come back to your senses. Come back to each other. So whether you are lighting a fire, warming an oven, or simply reading an old recipe, know that you're participating in a cultural act far larger than one meal. You're joining a quiet revolution, one that seeks not just to taste the past, but to shape a more mindful, connected, and nourishing future. In the final section of this series, we will bring everything together, reflecting on the journey from crumbs to culture, from curiosity to care, and offering a guide for how to continue exploring, sharing, and sustaining the world of medieval snacks in your own way. Point 20 brings us to the culmination of this journey, a reflective synthesis and an invitation. Over the course of this series, we have traveled from medieval marketplaces to modern kitchens, from monastic bakeries to TikTok tutorials, from famine food to festival feasts. We have explored the social, emotional, spiritual, and cultural power of snacks, and how the humble act of preparing and sharing food has always held deeper meaning than we often allow ourselves to recognize. Now at the end, we ask what next? The legacy of medieval snack culture lives on not only in recipes or rituals, but in the values it embodies: care, connection, patience, and presence. These values are not relics of a bygone era. They are living tools we can use to navigate today's challenges. Whether you're a history teacher, a parent, a chef, a writer, a student, or someone simply seeking meaning through food, you can carry this legacy forward in ways both simple and profound. Start with what feels most natural. Perhaps you'll revisit an old family recipe, an oat cake, a cheese tart, a fruit preserve, and make it with someone you love. Perhaps you'll join an online historical cooking community and share a photo of your attempt at a 13th century fritter. Maybe you'll teach a child about feast days and fasting traditions through baking. Or maybe you'll read a poem about bread and find in its metaphors the nourishment you didn't know you needed. You might organize a medieval snack night with friends or neighbors. Each person brings a dish inspired by a different region or time period. As you eat, you discuss what you learned not just about food, but about place people memory and meaning. These gatherings are more than meals. They are acts of living history. You can also explore how food intersects with your other passions. If you're a musician, learn songs that were sung during harvest festivals. If you're a gardener, try planting medieval herbs. If you're a visual artist, illustrate old recipes or depict scenes of communal baking. Each creative expression becomes another thread in the tapestry, another act of preservation and reinvention. In academic settings, consider integrating food studies into broader curricula. History teachers might use snack recipes to illustrate trade religion or social hierarchy. Language teachers might explore food vocabulary in medieval texts. Science teachers might use baking to explain heat fermentation or preservation. These interdisciplinary approaches not only engage students, but root learning in the tangible and the tasty. On a community level, local libraries, museums, or cultural centers can host events around medieval food traditions. Cooking demos, recipe exchanges, or storytelling nights help bring people together and encourage multi-generational participation. These moments help transform passive spectators of history into active stewards. For those involved in health and wellness, Medieval Snack Revival offers mindful alternatives to modern food culture. With its emphasis on seasonality balance and whole ingredients, it invites a gentler, more intentional way of eating. Nutritionists, therapists, and wellness coaches might consider incorporating historical cooking practices into their work, not as rigid prescriptions, but as invitations to reconnect with food as story, ritual, and care. Online, the movement continues to grow. Whether through blogs, podcasts, or video channels, the possibilities for sharing are limitless. You might start a series where you cook through a medieval cookbook. You might create a visual archive of snack evolution. You might interview elders about traditional treats and post their stories. Every post, video, or comment contributes to a growing global conversation. Importantly, remember that you don't need to be an expert to participate. In medieval times, most people learned by doing, by tasting, by asking, and by failing. The same applies today. If your tart collapses, if your pie burns, if your fritters come out uneven, laugh, learn, try again. The spirit of the tradition is not perfection, but presence. This series has shown us that medieval snacks are not simply quaint artifacts. They are dynamic, nourishing, and deeply human. They carry within them the rhythms of agriculture, the pulse of faith, the hum of domestic labor, the spark of creativity, and the song of story. In every bite, there is more than flavor, there is history, hope, and heart. So, as we conclude, let this be more than an ending. Let it be a beginning. Begin by asking, what is my food heritage? What are the snacks that shaped me? What stories have I inherited through taste? What stories can I pass on? Then cook, eat, share, reflect, repeat. In the words of one medieval proverb, a loaf of bread shared is twice as good. May your table be full, your oven warm, your hands ready, and your heart open. You are not alone in this work. You're part of a lineage of bakers' feeders, rememberers, and storytellers. And the story is still being written. Thank you for joining this journey. May the crumbs lead you home.